So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for joining us here at the Woodrow Wilson stage on this, the pre-event ESG Day at the 15th anniversary of ITW. It's my pleasure to welcome you. Next up, we have a panel exploring sustainable governance, which is part of our investment and governance track. If it'll change. I'd like to thank all our sponsors before we begin. They make this event possible, so take the time to appreciate their contributions. So joining us now, we have a fantastic group of speakers, including our moderator for the panel, Tim Passingham, who's chairman at Cambridge Management Consulting. So without further ado, Tim, over to you.
Brilliant. Chris, thanks ever so much. A big thank you and an advanced welcome to the panelists, Alex, to Roderick, to Sven, to Bruce. Thank you for joining us, and particularly to Bruce for stepping in at very short notice. So thanks for that. Can I early on do a big plug for the next session as well? Following on from this, we're looking at sustainability now, but that theme continues into the next panel session where the greener data center movement is being launched or relaunched. So please do join for that as well, if you can stay. The questions, if you have any, please use Slido. You can scan the QR code or go online, and please do ask any questions. Hopefully we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end, but it's a pretty big topic, so we'll cover as much as we possibly can in the next hour. Let me introduce the panelists, or let them introduce themselves first of all. It's probably better. They'll do a better job than I will. Ladies first. Alex, do you mind?
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me, Tim. Alexandra Rasch, CEO and founder of Caban Systems. We are a energy storage company. We help critical infrastructure providers decarbonize their data. We are based out of Northern California and operate about 12 countries to date.
Thank you. Roddy.
Thanks. I work at Eurofiber. Tim and I know each other from old days at British Telecom. And I work in a unit at Eurofiber called our international team. And what we do at Eurofiber, we operate large fiber open infrastructure. We have data centers, we've got cloud solutions, but primarily we operate 60,000 kilometers of fiber across 4 countries, Netherlands, Belgium, France, and recently an acquisition of large amounts of fiber in Germany.
Great, thank you. Sven?
So my name is Svein Hageseth. I'm the Chief Sales Officer of a Norwegian data center company called Green Mountain. We have 3 facilities in Norway currently. Next week we are announcing our first international outside of Norway and continue to build Green Mountain as a pan-European data center provider. Main focus is doing that, being sustainable, providing carbon neutral and high energy efficiency in all our data centers going forward.
Superb, thanks.
Yeah, and my name is Bruce Lehrman, founder and CEO for Involta. We are a data center IT services company. We are started about 15 years ago, and our original logo has kind of the 4 walls of a data center with a green center. And it was really designed about how we can continue to build our business to be as sustainable as possible, kind of from day one. And so it's great to be a part of this panel. We were recently acquired by Carlyle Group, and they have a very aggressive ESG initiatives, and we're excited to be a part of that group as well.
No, that's brilliant, thanks. So some real sustainability champions on the panel. Please do think about some questions to ask, and we'll come back to that at the end. But before we do, just thinking about some definitions. So I'm conscious not everybody in this room is engaged in the sustainability industry, probably most of us. If we can define initially, just when we talk about scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions, because we're going to talk quite a bit about carbon reduction. Do you mind just defining those terms for me, possibly with an example as well? Alex, can you go first with scope 1?
Yeah, absolutely. So scope 1, 2, and 3 were part of the science-based targets that were set forth. And scope 1 is really direct emissions from assets that the company owns. An example of that would be any type of diesel-based generators, internal combustion engines for vehicles, or any other type of direct emissions in somebody's network or critical infrastructure network.
Brilliant, thank you. And Bruce, do you mind defining Scope 2 emissions for us?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way for me to remember Scope 2 are the things that you buy that have emissions issues. Think about like power or steam, or if you're buying heat. In our industry, it's really dominated by the power we buy and what the source of that energy is for us. And so that, again, it's you think about Scope 2, you think about those things that you buy that are emitting greenhouse gases.
Great, thanks. And Roderick, for Scope 3 emissions.
All the rest.
Yeah.
Scope 3 emissions are everything in the supply chain that you're dependent on. You've got upstream and downstream dependency, so everything you actually procure. We weren't going to mention travel, but travel and transportation is included. In the upstream and the downstream, what you do with who you're providing to, so your customers. So in our example, if we're providing CPE to a customer, what's the life cycle of a CPE? Does it come back? Do we actually upgrade? Do we take it back? How does that get? So that entire scope, it's actually the most challenging one that we all find most challenging, but it's also the space where the most energy is to be found, or the most reductions are to be found. Some reports show up to 90% of that's where. So I think that's the biggest challenge I think we face.
Yeah. So the hardest bit is the largest in one sense.
Yeah.
No, that's good. And thanks for the examples as well. So as we think about how do we get to net zero and our carbon reduction plans or our climate action plans, different governments, different regulators, different businesses have different terms for this. What do you think the best way to start on that journey is for your organizations? Sven, do you mind if I kick off with you?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think it's very regional dependent on how you can start on that. But of course, to go after the low-hanging fruits that makes the biggest impact. So, for instance, in Norway, it's very easy to have renewable power, for instance. So, making sure that you actually report that correctly, because even if we're having 100% renewables, it's not carbon-free, for instance. So, the ability to kind of make sure that you start off easy. And then, of course, there is a lot of things that you can do. So I'm part of an organization as well called the iMasons, and I'm responsible for building a sustainability framework for the data center industry. And there we're thinking about from cradle to grave type of strategy. So even when you're starting to build your first data center, what do you actually need to do so that you don't do anything stupid from the beginning? And then you kind of have these different aspects. And it's very... So like I said, we are a sustainability-driven first company. It's easy for us to talk about sustainability, but the ability for us to share our experiences on how we can make sure that others know where to start, share our ideas, I think that's one of the things that we can do to help others. But start with the basic things and focus on that, and then you continue to build on that and make sure that you ask good questions for companies like ourselves or others on how you can improve.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Alex, your thoughts?
Yeah, so we work very closely with operators and sometimes with tower providers. And so we look at impact in sort of two different lenses. One of them is how do we help our own customers not only think about the framework of sustainability, but also implementing it. I want to say 80% of our customers have a sustainability group, but 20% of those actually have a dedicated team that thinks about sustainability practices and how to implement the strategies that they've laid out. So we become almost like an ESG partner for our customers and help them through that energy transition. And then internal to us, we are original designers and manufacturers of energy storage, and so we always think about the end of life of a product. What happens at the 10-year mark, the 15-year mark, and who is picking up those assets, who's recycling of those, and so on. And so as we think about the initial design, we're very conscious of what materials we select so that we ensure that they're recyclable at the end of life, and look at our own supply chain of materials. Obviously, if we think very consciously about what materials we select, we end up not being necessarily the most inexpensive up front, but the TCO over time is is much better because our systems don't have to be replaced for 15 years, and it's a high cycle life. So it's a little bit of a shift in thought, but to a more sustainable one and a less immediate sort of gratification type of result.
That's brilliant, thank you. There's some things I want to come back to there. Definitely the 80% you quoted. I'm going to test you guys on whether you're seeing the same, because that's actually a great figure. You also mentioned sustainability by design there a little bit, and that you're building that into your systems. I'd like to come back to that later, because that's powerful, I think, really powerful. Roddy, your thoughts on the same, your advice on tackling, where do you start in building a carbon reduction plan or a climate action plan?
Yeah, I mean, you see it in all the literature, and we see it us personally, and we see it with all of our stakeholders. It starts at the top. Yeah. It's commitment from the board. So it's not lip service. There's a lot of conversations around it. So it's about making that commitment first, sticking to that commitment, and then making sure you're associated in the right international fora, whether it's ISO, whether it's this fora, but it's making sure that you're actually hooked up to recognized and transparent measures. So it's first making the commitment, making sure you understand what you're measuring, going through the process, putting the right measures and tax it, and the governance in place, and making that transparent, and making sure that others can actually check that with you as well. And what we see now, well, I know we're going to get into it later, is we're getting a lot of questions about it. So customers are asking about it, suppliers are asking about it, it's going back and forth. And that the dynamics of that starting to happen really is going to make the difference in the Scope 3 effectively.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that point as well. I think Kathleen kindly sent me your report, and it's superb. I mean, you guys are really thinking through some of that stuff, so that's really good.
Yeah, and I think the easy thing is to kind of dismiss it as we're really small. We operate 11 data centers, right? Yeah. There's 7 million in the world. We're a spec. Why would we even start? Yeah, it starts with all of the small bits count.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree. Everybody's got to do their part.
Yeah.
And Bruce, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what you were just mentioning. You have to start with wherever you can find, good ROI. You get the low-hanging fruit first, but it's a commitment to, working that every day and trying to find, ways that you can be more efficient in your organization. And it's also pushing your partners. And for us, I mean, that would be like Vertiv or Eaton, Schneider. I was on their advisory board. We talked a lot about energy efficiency, and a lot of these organizations have made their equipment. I think the latest stat I saw from Vertiv was about 60% more efficient. The power companies the same way. I mean, Google and came into the state of Iowa and said, we're interested in building a data center here, but it has to be 100% renewable. So that started Mid-American Energy on a journey of wind energy that now their commitment is 100% renewable. We're a long ways from Norway, but I think the power companies, Minnesota Power were there. They're 50% today renewable. I think by making sure that they're aware that it's important to their consumers, that helps them make decisions.
And the industry has made great progress, I think. So some of the things I was reading, in the last few weeks have been, rough data center, telecoms powers, roughly 1%. I think a lot of people think now it's 1.5%, but that's, over the last 10 years, that hasn't changed, when data volumes have changed 20-fold in the same time. So, there has been a huge amount of efficiency driven, to your point, which is good. Alex, coming back to your 80%, you mentioned 80% of your customers you're working with now have either a dedicated sustainability person or a team. Can you expand on that a little bit? Because I think that's amazing. That's good progress.
Yeah, sure. So I started Come On exactly 5 years ago, or a little shy of 5 years. And I would say there were hardly any customers actually that had a dedicated team. And when I say dedicated team, I mean somebody who we do not have to educate from zero. I mean somebody who understands at a minimum what GHG actually means and the impact. And so what we've seen is a very big shift in that a lot of the decision making is now done not only on the engineering level, on the operational level, but also there's a sustainability team associated to who we work with. So as an example, América Móvil, we operate in 11 countries in Latin America today, and América Móvil has a dedicated team that is looking at each individual country and the implications on that. and very similar with other tier one carriers in the States and sort of in other regions. And so that shift really happened, I would say, in the last 2 years. And there are very clear targets, and what we find ourselves is most of our customers want a partner. They don't really want a vendor. They want a partner that can help them understand, are these goals achievable, and if so, what's the best execution strategy for making sure that they happen within a specific time frame. And then the other thing too is there are a lot of innovative models of implementing solutions to address all scope 1, 2, and 3, but specifically scope 2 on the alternative use of energy through distributed power generation and storage done through energy as a service, whereby in lieu of utilizing the utility in a country where typically they still use carbon or fossil fuels as primary source of power for the grid, you have an alternative source of power in that site.
Yeah, through batteries or
Yes.
storage, etc. No, that's good. And presumably when you engage with that either dedicated sustainability person or team, it's much easier for you. The chance of your project being successful are a lot better, because the organization's already bought into
I would say
climate
it's
change.
still difficult. It's still a very difficult process. However, because you do have a dedicated team, I think the process of education is probably shortened.
Okay, that's good. And guys, Roderick, I'll start with you. Do you have a chief sustainability officer or sustainability person or team in Eurofiber?
We've got news. That person is starting the 1st of July.
Okay, good news.
Now, we've had a team in place for a long time, and what we've seen, we're a company that's exponentially growing. We're making acquisitions. We have 5 different companies in France, so we're a really mixed bag, and that makes it difficult to get everyone aligned. So it's been going and going and going, and we've hit a point where the executive decision was made, we need to hire. So we're putting a person in place to coordinate the entire effort. That doesn't mean all the other people go away, but there's a lot of knowledge that has been built up. Our procurement teams are really geared to procure in the right sustainable way as well. We work with a lot of contractors to make sure they're done work sustainably. So we're already looking at the chain, but we've come to a point where we've made the decision that it makes sense to put a person in place, and that person might grow. As we grow, we're going to be employing 300 people in Germany to support our efforts there. It will probably need more people to support that effort as well.
Brilliant, thanks. That's great progress. Sven, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think we have kind of the same story, right? When we started our first data center the plans to build our first data center in 2010, the whole story was, okay, we need renewables and we need high energy efficiency, and that was sustainability at that time. And then onto that came waste handling and some other things, and it kind of just built on and built on and built on to a level where our clients now expect the reporting to be accurate, right? 5 years ago, if I go back that far, it was good enough to say that you were carbon neutral, and nobody really made any follow-up questions. And you see that today even, right? Tons of different data centers claiming to be carbon neutral, or they're doing some minor things and kind of claiming that as big wins. But as the maturity level of sustainability is increasing, and clients are demanding more and more in regards to reporting, because it goes up to the boards and they get their compensation based on that. So I think what we see is that we also needed to hire somebody. We are now in the end of May issuing our first sustainability report, annual sustainability report. We're doing scope 1 and 2 initially. And before we're starting on scope 3, because I think one of the big challenges as well is that you mentioned ISO and you mentioned a few other. When I started this work with the iMasons, I looked at 100 different companies on how do they want to report on sustainability. Yeah. And some of them are more mature than others, but in general is you see all of these different things in the different annual reports on how they report it. And we need some sort of standardization on that going forward, because we can report it our way and there's nobody there to arrest us on saying that reporting is incorrect. Yeah. So I think that's one of the things that we need to mature as an organization in regards to how do we actually report on scope 1, 2, and 3. going forward. So we have also hired our first sustainability officer, hired it back in January, but we also see that we need way more knowledge behind it to be able to make sure that we keep up to pace in regards to the level of reporting going forward.
Yeah, that's more good progress. We'll come back to the reporting piece because I think that's quite an important theme. And Bruce, your perspective then from the top.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've kind of grew up from a small company and really was focused on it, but maybe not as thoughtful always as we could have been. So I think when we have matured as an organization, we've continued to make that kind of foremost of importance in terms of our sustainability. Now being owned by Carlyle Group, their initiatives, and you'll see this with a lot of financial publicly traded companies. It used to be the ESG stocks were these little fringe companies that everyone knew maybe you'd feel good investing in them, but you'd never get performance. Well, now there's so much money being invested in truly great ESG companies that as a publicly traded organization, you really need to be focused on your ESG and not just a story, but you have to be delivering. And so Carlyle Group they're committed to having 75% of their portfolio companies in line with the Paris Climate Accord by 2025, and after that, every one of them within 2 years of being acquired will have a plan. So, I think you look at organizations that historically maybe wouldn't have been as public about it. I mean, it's a big deal now from a finance perspective, and it's a great thing to do. So I mean, you get a double win by really focusing on it.
And Bruce, just to expand on that, so from a private equity point of view, your owners, how prescriptive are they being? Are they saying you must have a chief sustainability officer, a team of this big, you must spend this amount, you must be B Corp registered or ISO 14001 or CDP, one of the many standards? Are they defining things to that level? Or
So,
are they saying you've got to hit the Paris Accord by 2025 and it's up to you?
We're early in the process with them, but their team is engaged, and I think the first thing is for us to say, like, here's what we're doing, and then they're really there to say, like, how can we help you do more, better, faster? And so I mean, it's really more of a support resource than it is a prescriptive, like, you must do this, must do that.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's interesting. I sit on the board of one of Foresight's and in Europe they're obviously own a huge amount of green power generation and renewable investment, but they support their investment companies in the telco sector a huge amount with respect to kind of being focused on the right things for sustainability, but again aren't totally prescriptive about what they should do.
Yeah.
So it sounds quite similar.
And that's possible how it evolves. If you're not making the progress that you need to meet their objectives, right?
Yeah, good, cool, thank you. And we'll come back to the reporting piece, as I say. Going back to the teams though, and Alex, the people you engage with, to what extent are they driving the change in their organizations as sustainability champions or sustainability officers versus the regulation or, are you from a kind of sell side perspective encouraging them to use your services?
Well, I would frame it that first off, our offerings, yes, they're more sustainable, but they're also more cost effective. And so it is an internal decision that gets made on the basis of, is this helping my bottom line? And is this also checking off some of the requirements that I have for ESG, including scope 1, 2, and 3? So I think that it's a combination of both, though very, very driven by cost savings. So it is an internal decision. We work with kind of international, usually non-governmental companies, though we do work with some governments in Latin America as well. But the governments that we work with are very focused on sustainability impacts. And so I would say that the majority of it is internal driven, and then there is some external pressure, and I think pressure just drives change. It's just delayed change. That's all.
Yeah, makes sense. Roderick, your perspective?
On?
On the external versus internal kind of drivers? What are you
Yeah, so we also are private equity owned. We're not driven hard by their demands. We're actually quite ambitious ourselves. It's also protecting their assets, right? In the future, the value of your assets will become less if you're not, on this route. So we've already committed to Scope 1 and 2 to be zero emission free by 2030. So that's there. We've committed that to our financial investors. So there's not a huge push. They're absolutely interested. They're not dictating exactly what it should be. And internally, I think the internal component is also interesting. It's just from a people perspective, a hiring perspective. We want to attract people that are interested in the subject as well. So it's something that when we have hire discussions, we have these type of conversations as well. So it has to be, so one of the external ones, stakeholders, is obviously our financials, a private equity firm, but also the internal, what's the internal combustion happening? Is it in the DNA for us to change and make a difference there as well? That's an aspect that we kind of don't really talk about, but for us is important as well. Is everyone talking about it? Because that starts moving. And we've been moving it with everyone that all of our stakeholders, as I mentioned before. But a key stakeholder is also the internal stakeholder, the people that work for us.
Yeah, I think it's a common theme, isn't it? But you mentioned there the talent piece. We haven't really got time to come to it today, so almost a separate panel. But I think it's a huge attraction. People, particularly younger people, want to join companies that are going to make a difference and are doing the right thing. We're seeing that in all the companies we work with. And Sven, obviously Green Mountain, it's kind of in your brand. You were pretty much set up to do this. I know you're going to say this was always an internal push, but tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I can, so of course for us it's always about sustainability first. I wish that there was more push from outside into us as providers in regards to sustainability. I think too much of the decisions is actually driven by business first than actually the environment first. Of course, the best thing is when you are able to do both. Like for instance, we have cost of power around 3.5 cents in Norway, 100% renewable. So if you build a data center in Norway versus building it in Frankfurt, you save about 70–80%. Yeah. So it's a huge cost benefit. Versus building it in Germany. Of course, there are some other evaluations there, but I think in general, our biggest inhibitor is that we tend to do things exactly like we did yesterday. So I would like to have way more procurement people asking about what do you actually mean by carbon neutrality? How is your road or your race to net zero? And I think we tend to take decisions based on, especially in data centers, regarding the engineering requirements more than actually the sustainability requirements. And I think that's one of the things that needs to change.
Yeah.
So
I think it's starting to, but a bit like Bruce, your comment around the work infrastructure masons are doing, which is really positive. That's self-generated by the industry. That's not an external pressure. No. We're doing that, which is a good thing. But there probably should be more external pressure. I agree.
But I think it's related to one of these questions that just popped up, right, in regards to carbon credits.
Yeah.
It's carbon credits kind of serves a purpose, but it also is an inhibitor for taking the tough choices. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we see is that we promote that if you have the opportunity, then go green versus buying yourself green, right? So I think that's one of the things that we need to be better at. And we see some of the hyperscalers now taking serious responsibilities on actually doing that versus, building data centers in places where there is really no green supply for data loads that don't need to be there. And I think that's one of the big challenges as well, is that you don't need all your data that you can touch, right? You can move somewhere else. And I think that's one of the things that we as an industry need to be much better at going forward.
And we can come back to carbon credits or offsetting similarly later.
Just saw the question.
That's a good point. No, it's a great segue. Thank you. And Bruce, your perspective, thinking from a CEO who's founded a data center on green principles in a similar way, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think, historically, it's really been internally driven. It starts with the culture of your business and how do you instill in your organization, that desire to be thinking about the environment as you think about innovation in a lot of different areas, and how do you make sure that one of those pillars is about, the climate and the environment. And so I think that that's one of the things that we've done in the organization really well. I think, again, we're maybe not as mature as some of these organizations in terms of how we measure and monitor. We do, PUE ratings, and we've, worked on goals and trends to try to make sure that we're doing all we can do. But again, I think it's about like that culture of innovation, has a part to play, and we all need to be thinking about what we can do differently. And I'll give you an example. We don't have raised floor data centers. We have kind of on grade, on slab facilities. We worked with a company to go and build these air duct socks and create them so that we could put the air where we needed it most, and so the hot and cold aisle containments that everybody does, but it's all these things that you do that can have a huge impact in how much energy you use, and it's something that you have to say, I'm going to put these 5 people at building all this capability out, or we're going to spend the money to go make all this stuff happen, and you really do need to take that action and create that culture where your organization is coming to you saying, hey, listen, if you give me $1 million, I can go do this. And I think that's one of the greatest things that can happen, right?
Yeah, no, agreed, definitely.
Yeah.
Sven, when we think about external pressures, obviously customers are the most powerful ones. We've obviously got regulation and other market forces, but you mentioned not enough customers are asking to see your kind of, green credentials or your own carbon reduction plan. What are you guys seeing? Alex, I'll start with you first, but in terms of people who are asking for that in the market.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that not a lot of people are asking the right questions. They're asking generally a pretty high-level questions around, are you ISO 14000 certified, things like that. But I think going a level deeper on reporting on your materials, reporting on your life cycle analysis on all of the sites, on all of the units that you deploy, and then I think in general when you're going through that vendor onboarding process, I think there's a big portion missing, which is what is to be measured on impact as well instead of just on price. Today, it's still very much price sensitive. It's driven by really your bottom line and how do you help customers optimize operational expenses. And so I think that if we put up front, if we put some value, or at least you index impact and specifically measurable scope 1, 2, and 3, I think that that's a very good avenue and that's a really good start. And it will help procurement officers select the appropriate candidate for equipment, instead of once you get qualified as an engineering sort of check the box. It's really up to the procurement personnel to just decide what is best for the company in the long run.
Yeah, no, you made some great points there. There's a question that kind of relates to that, but in a high inflation, difficult supply chain, rising interest rate world that we're in, those pressures grow, don't they? They seriously grow, and that's maybe where you need regulation to kind of help.
Yeah, we've seen as a manufacturing company, obviously we've seen a lot of the microprocessing world, microchips right now. There's a huge shortage, and the Port of Shanghai being closed, a lot of things have driven us to move our supply chain more locally, and obviously you have to invest in your suppliers, and I think I will emphasize that pretty strongly with everybody, because if you strengthen your own suppliers, I think in general your entire value chain, your scope 3 is then set up. If you grow with them, if you invest in them, if you believe in them, if you give them the time, I think that's the way to actually grow a sustainable business.
Yeah, definitely. But there's a benefit there. Your supply chain is traveling less.
Yes.
Your components, your air and ship miles are lower, so there is some benefits, definitely. Roderick, from a Eurofiber point of view, you've got a beautiful report. I've seen it. It's impressive. I sent it to my team saying ours needs to be better. It look like this.
Take you up on it.
So you can send me the bill for that. But how many customers are asking for that? What sort of percentage are your customers saying, I want to see this?
Yeah, what we see happening is large global players are more engaged we've just gone through a very large process of one of the biggest cloud players in the world. They've been very, very specific about how we are dealing with this issue. So is it down to the right levels of monitoring and going, is it down to scope 1, 2, and 3? Not yet, but it's the first steps. I think it's right. That's where we see it. So large organizations, global organizations, as well as governmental organizations. They can't even get around it anymore. So when we do RFPs in Belgium and the Netherlands, we're seeing a lot of those questions being asked. Maybe not enough yet, but it's happening. It's just, you're not going to get around it. So that, I think, we're out of the gates. Yeah. And it's just going to become more and more professional. What we also see happening is not legislation, but when we start to build our data centers, they will ask us a whole bunch of questions about how we become carbon neutral. And one of the things that we've been looking at, and I'm sure you've looked at it before, is how we bring that energy back into the communities, because we build our data centers, we're very densely populated, and we have a lot of plans to put that energy back into the communities through central heating. We can output at 60 degrees centigrade, which can heat houses. And we have a couple of projects going on now where we will use that energy to actually heat houses, and it makes us 97% efficient.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. And Sven, you mentioned not enough customers. What sort of percentage are you seeing?
So of course we're very promoting sustainability very high. So we get a lot of requests for clients that need or want to have sustainable solutions. But I think we still need to work hard to create awareness of what they should actually ask. Because, like I say, you will get the RFPs who ask for PE of below someone level, and that's where it kind of stops. Mm-hmm. So I think we still have a huge task at hand to make sure that we educate buyers also on what they can ask for. And one of the things that we see now in Norway is just what Roderick spoke about in regards to heat reuse. The typical way of doing that is, just like Roderick said, is district heating. We have thought a little bit differently about that, and that's back to your point of innovation, is that we have looked at how can you use the excess heat directly instead of having to add something to a district heating system. So we're running 2 projects now, one with an onshore lobster fish farm, where to produce optimally, a lobster needs around 20 degrees of water. Then it grows the whole time. In natural habitat, it takes maybe 5 years to grow a plate-sized lobster. By having 20 degrees, you reduce that period from 5 years down to 2 years, or even 18 months. So from a sustainability perspective, also very good. We can use the heat directly. We don't need to add anything, because a district heating system, you need to add something to bring it even higher than 50 degrees if you're far away from the data center. That's something today is typically fossil fuel.
No, that's good.
Right?
I was so not expecting you to say lobster in this session.
Nobody is, but that's what we need to do from a sustainability perspective as well, is that it's so easy to think about what's easy for us to do, right? So we have looked at how can we integrate other industries into a holistic perspective, thinking of more of a circular aspect. And that's how we came up with onshore lobster, district heating, greenhouses, protein production, algae production. And now that we're looking for data centers, we bring the companies with us as we continue to expand. So as long as we have access to salt water, for instance, you can do onshore lobster in Dubai. It doesn't have to be in Norway. So there's multiple different opportunities. If you continue to innovate, you continue to push the needle of what sustainability actually is.
No, it's good. I mean, there's some brilliant thinking there, but you've also, twice you've made the important point that, carbon, neutral energy is not just green energy. Everybody thinks that's carbon neutral. There's still a whole supply chain that's got to service that and make it happen, as you well know, Alex. But, and Bruce, going back to your business, what sort of percentage of customers are now asking to see your CRP or your climate action plan?
Yeah, I think, our industry, we're focused more on the, let's say, kind of healthcare, manufacturing, financial services companies. And it does touch on a little bit of the second question about the rates. And when we first started 15 years ago, there was a really pretty large delta between, the normal power and renewable power. And so we had a really hard time getting a pickup on our client base that would pay that premium for that renewable energy. That delta now is shrunk down to a point where, it's getting to be, a lot more competitive, and, we're seeing a lot more customers opting for that. So I think this cost parity, as we get closer to that, it really becomes a real no-brainer for organizations to choose, better options that way. And then the other part of this, paying for sustainability, a lot of the work pays for itself. And it's just kind of a matter of how long you want to have your payback period. But a lot of the investments you can make in, sustainability, have a really good return as well. And so, if you can continue to focus on the ones and maybe extend out the life of what a normal project, you'd say, you need to have a payback period of X, maybe it's X minus something, and say, this is something we're doing because it's a corporate initiative.
No, brilliant. Thanks, Bruce. Let's come back to Scope 3 emissions, the toughest bit, if you like. Alex, you gave some good examples earlier, but how do we work harder to drive improvements in all of our supply chains? And Scope 3 actually goes in both directions. It's the full life cycle of the product or the service. But what are some of the things we can be doing to do that better in our industry, do you think?
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but the end customers in the industry that we're in, which is on the mobile side, it's, the end customers are us asking the operators asking their own suppliers, and then suppliers like us that supply energy services to the operators, us asking our own supply chain to do that. So it's a multiple effect if you can invest into your own supply chain. And so I think that really the way to move forward with that is to partner with somebody to have a plan of action on Scope 3 with your own team, and then start off with the desired design from scratch. So don't it's not a patchwork of vendors. It's not something that you integrate ad hoc. It's something that you are very thoughtful about. What are my values? What are my design challenges? What are my requirements? And then you design something from scratch so that it does have a longer life, so that it can be recycled. And then really it's documentation and transparency with that data. And so we have a lot of challenges today where we work with a lot of operators that have absolutely no data, and so they have no baseline to start off. And so one of the things that we really promote is helping our own customers start putting databases together on what are they currently doing so that they can measure improvements. And we do that today. We have over 600 sensors in all of our equipment that measures all different types of power, whether it's AC, DC, high voltage, low voltage, efficiencies, pressure, temperature, all of the things related to efficiency, so that we can get better and better, more data. And then right now we're running AI across all of our platforms because we've had so much data. So our customers can look back, what happened 3 years ago, how much data did I use, can I correlate that with traffic? And then at some point you're going to be measuring your data, your carbon footprint based on how much carbon, or based on how much traffic did you see in that specific site. So
Brilliant.
Trends.
That's the best I've heard from any manufacturing organization ever, I think, in terms of description. So thank you. That's brilliant. Roderick, what are Eurofiber doing? How are you driving Scope 3 emissions down?
Yeah, the most important aspect is to be able to, as Alex just said, is to be able to measure, to have a baseline somewhere. Where do you start? And for us, it's the most important thing is engage. So having conversations, every single conversation, any procurement conversation that we're having should include this. Every single design, we call it, by design, it should already be. So as soon as you start to create something, it has to be part of the design, rather than having to refit and relook at things years past. So it's, it's the design part. That's where it starts. It has engagement with our partners, and having those, in-depth conversations and sharing those plans with them. Right? This is what we're planning to do. How are you going to be? So it's that entire ecosystem of partners that you want to bring along, and some will be able to run, others will be slow. You have to be patient, take them along, but you want to set goals, and you want to be able to measure those goals, and have a governance around it, and put that somewhere out where it can be transparent in a body, an organization that can be checked, and there's checks and balances, the right governance around it, so that everyone can go to the same place. To be able to compare industries is going to be difficult in the future, but just continue to drive those ambitions. And I think at a point we'll get there, it'll be more and more, but it's a journey.
Yeah, no, that's great. There's some good examples there. Data, sustainability by design, governance. Sven?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same things. It's as we are starting to get tougher questions from our clients in regards to sustainability, we need to ask those same questions back to our supply chain. We continue to do that. Every time we build a new data center, and we're planning a new data center, we're kind of challenging status quo. Like I mentioned earlier, is like when we built our first data center in 2010, the way that we build now is totally different. At 2010, we believe we built the world's most energy efficient data center, and it still is very, very good. It's PUE at 1.15 and it's super efficient, but we need to kind of push that needle as well in regards to, okay, so what materials are we using? How are we kind of handling waste? How are we continuing to monitor? We have 80,000 sensors in our data centers to measure everything. Without measurement, you can't do anything, right? So the ability to do that and be transparent with our clients in regards to that data. So we also have the same kind of things where clients can go in and see exactly what they're getting. So we measure carbon footprint, energy use, PUE, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's about making sure that we continue to push the needle, and we do that with our supply chain and make sure that we connect with the people who are actually willing and are able to support that sustainability agenda.
Definitely, and be transparent about the information so that people can learn from it. And Bruce, your thoughts?
Yeah, first of all, I agree with everything that's been said, and trying not to repeat what already has been very well articulated. I think one of the things that I would say is, you know what, we're 5 of us here, but we have a room of people here that can also go challenge your vendors and suppliers and power companies and make sure that they know that it's important that they're thinking about sustainability first. The other, organizations, the next time you meet with your senators or congressmen, I mean, we're in a great place to do that. Set up some meetings this week and tell them how important it is. And listen, I mean, that's the biggest checkbook in this country is the federal government, and they can make things happen. So, communicate what you want to have happen. And I know it's a dysfunctional organization, at least in this country, but the more they know that it's important to their constituents, the better able they are to make decisions.
Yeah, amen. I mean, that's a great place to end, and we're out of time, sadly. Bruce, thank you for that. We have one question we haven't answered, so on the screen at the bottom, so I will give that, Sven, to you naturally, being from the coldest place here.
A lot is the answer. So, of course, we're very fortunate again in Norway. In addition to the renewable power we have, it's extremely cold and wet in Norway. Yeah. So, of course, we have free cooling, I would say 360 days out of 365 days a year. So it matters a lot, right? Because the most inefficient data center we have today delivers around 1.17 in PUE, right? So we have the opportunity, when it's cold and wet, to be able to provide a very good energy efficiency. We do that both with using fjord cooling. So we have a data center in an old NATO naval facility. So we cool it by gravity. So water flows into 2 basins. We use 2 small pumps. So we get energy, we use about 2 to 3 kilowatt of energy to get the equivalent of 1,000 kilowatt of cooling. So, and I think that's one of the things as well, is that you need to look at what's specific for the region that you are in, right? So you can't use fjord cooling everywhere or water cooling everywhere, but the ability to kind of take the best from around the world in regards to how you plan and build your data centers.
Yeah, good. Thank you. That's a great answer. Bruce, thank you. Sven, thank you. Roderick, thank you. Alex, thank you. You've been a great panel. Thanks ever so much.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim, Alexandra, Roderick, Sven, and Bruce. some really valuable insights into how all of you respectively have been working to promote and implement sustainable practices within your businesses. I'd once again like to thank all of our sponsors for their support in making this all possible. If the screen will change. Our next session, starting at 4 p.m, is a panel brought to you by our partners at JSA. We're celebrating the launch of their Greener Data movement with speakers from JSA, EdgeConneX, Infrastructure Masons, Involta and Kohler. Following directly on from the discussion, there will also be a drinks reception, so please don't miss out. Thank you all and take care.